You know that feeling. You're trying to get your head around something important, something complex, but you're just drowning in information.
Yeah, totally. Information overload.
Exactly. You want the knowledge, but not the feeling of being buried by it all.
Right.
And that's what we try to do here, isn't it? Cut through the noise, find the valuable stuff.
Mm-hmm. Find that signal.
And today, we're looking at, well, a power tool that operates in the quiet. Strategic silence.
Strategic silence. And we're leaning on Niccolò Machiavelli for this one. 16th century Florence, the prince.
Right, the famous, maybe infamous Machiavelli.
Exactly. And, in our world, which is all about communicate, share everything.
All we gone.
Yeah. The idea of deliberately saying less.
Yeah.
It feels pretty counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. We're always told, speak up, be heard, your voice matters. Which it does, but...
But is that the only way?
That's the question, right? In a world rewarding constant chatter, is there actually power in holding back, in saying less?
Mm-hmm.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack these ideas, these sort of Machiavellian principles of strategic silence from the material we looked at.
Yeah, see how they work.
And figure out, how can we actually use this stuff in modern life to maybe gain a bit of influence, avoid some traps?
Let's dive in. The core idea first. Silence as a weapon. Or maybe better, a strategic advantage.
Yeah.
Machiavelli kind of saw it this way. Speech creates appearances, right? What you want people to see.
Mm-hmm. The image.
But silence preserves the reality underneath, what's actually going on. Think about how much we curate online, for instance.
Yeah, that constant performance.
So the stuff left unsaid, that's often where the real leverage is.
Right. It's like in all this noise, the powerful move might be, well, no verbal move at all.
Exactly. You achieve your goals while others are still busy talking about theirs.
The quiet win. I like that.
And Machiavelli, he lived in dangerous political times. He was super aware of the dangers of talking too much.
I bet.
Okay, so one big cost, speaking, creates commitments, obligations.
Right. You say you'll do X.
And then you're kind of stuck. If circumstances change and you need to pivot, changing course makes you look
inconsistent, weak, maybe?
Yeah, or untrustworthy. Silence, though, it keeps your options wide open. Flexibility.
That makes so much sense. Like in a negotiation, right? If you blurt out your bottom line immediately.
You've just given away your power, but if you hold back on those absolute limits...
You keep that wiggle room, that flexibility.
Exactly. Another cost. Talking too much exposes how you think. Your limitations, even.
Oh, interesting. How so?
The more you talk, the more predictable you become. People see your patterns, your assumptions.
And that makes you easier to manipulate.
Absolutely. Machiavelli had that line about judging a prince by the company he keeps, his advisors.
Right.
You could kind of stretch that to say you judge someone's strategic sense by how much they unnecessarily reveal about their own thinking.
Huh. Never thought of it quite like that. Like the colleague who has to walk you through every single thought process versus the one who just gives the concise conclusion.
Exactly. Who sounds more confident, more in control?
The second one, usually.
And then there's the mystique factor. Constant talking just diminishes your authority. It makes you commonplace.
Ah, okay. Connect that to Machiavelli's feared versus loved thing?
Right. Being feared or maybe respected, let's say, in a modern context requires a bit of distance. Mystery creates that distance.
Whereas the person who explains absolutely everything
becomes familiar, ordinary. And the ordinary doesn't command the same kind of gravitas.
Yeah, you really do see this everywhere. The person in the meeting who just has to weigh in on everything.
Their voice becomes noise after a while.
Totally. Or like the friend broadcasting every mundane detail on social media, it just loses impact.
Or the negotiator who hates silence so much they just start giving things away to fill the gap.
Oh, that's a classic mistake.
Definitely. And think about leaders, the one who feels compelled to answer every single tweet, every criticism.
They risk looking defensive, maybe even weak, and they amplify the noise.
Exactly. From Machiavelli's viewpoint, our modern obsession with constant communication, total transparency, he might see that as a huge strategic vulnerability.
Like we're just giving away power. Voluntarily.
Pretty much. Offering up valuable info, sometimes with no clear benefit in return.
Okay, so the material you shared breaks down strategic silence into three main types. That was really helpful. The first one is information gathering silence.
Right. This is about keeping quiet, especially at the start, letting others talk first.
Why? What's the goal there?
You let them reveal their thoughts, their intentions, maybe even their weaknesses. before you show your hand.
Ah, okay. Let them put their cards on the table.
Exactly. Machiavelli had a quote for this. Something like, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally.
Mm-hmm.
The fool blurts everything out immediately, learns nothing. The wise person waits, listens, gathers intelligence."
So you create this, what was the term? Asymmetric information advantage.
That's the one. You know more about them than they know about you, because they talked and you listened.
Okay, I can see that in negotiations. Like you said, whoever talks first about price or terms often sets the anchor, maybe unfavorably.
Precisely. Or even in relationships, right? The person who genuinely listens tends to understand the dynamics, the other person's needs, much better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in competitions, if you shout your strategy from the rooftops,
You're probably not going to do as well as the team that keeps things under wraps until they act.
okay, so that's information gathering. What's the second type?
Authority building silence. This is where silence isn't just passive listening, it's actively shaping how people see you, how much power they think you have.
How does that work?
Think about the fox and the lion analogy sometimes linked to Machiavelli. The lion has strength, the fox has cunning. Part of the fox's cunning is knowing when not speaking actually enhances your authority more than talking would.
So holding back makes you seem more powerful.
It can, because people tend to fill in the blanks, right? When someone in charge is measured, speaks selectively, doesn't react to every little thing.
We assume they're confident, in control, deliberate.
Exactly. Their words land with more weight because they're rarer. Compare, say, a junior exec who nervously over-explains everything.
To a CEO who gives a concise, firm decision. Yeah, big difference in perceived authority.
Or think about insecurity versus security. The insecure person often feels the need to constantly justify themselves.
While the secure person is comfortable just stating their position, or even comfortable with silence.
Right. That silence itself projects confidence. We tend to project competence and control onto those who seem comfortable with not filling every moment with talk.
Fascinating. Okay, what's the third type?
This one's really interesting. Ambiguity preserving silence.
Ambiguity. So
Okay.
being intentionally unclear.
Sort of. It's about maintaining a degree of uncertainty around your intentions or position, strategically.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, it connects back to that safer to be feared than loved idea, in a way, if your position isn't crystal clear.
Different people can interpret it differently, maybe in ways that suit them.
Exactly. They project their own hopes or fears onto you. It keeps your options open. You're not locked into one specific interpretation.
And that gives you freedom to move later. And maybe deniability if things go wrong.
Precisely. Think about politicians making broad statements on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
Oh.
Vague enough to appeal to lots of different people.
Or skilled negotiators who avoid pinning themselves down to a firm yes or no too early.
Keeps the other side guessing.
Leaders might paint a compelling vision, but deliberately leave the specific how a bit flexible.
Right. It's not necessarily being dishonest then.
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that sometimes forcing absolute clarity too soon can actually be a strategic disadvantage. It can box you in.
Okay, so it's about timing and keeping options open.
Exactly. And beyond these tactics, silence itself has some really powerful psychological effect.
Right, let's get into that. The psychology. You mentioned projection spaces.
Yeah. Humans are, generally speaking, uncomfortable with voids, with silence, with a lack of information,
We feel the need to fill it.
instinctively. And we often fill it with our own stuff, our assumptions, anxieties, hopes, which might have nothing to do with the reality of the situation or the silent person.
So the silence becomes like a screen they project onto.
Kind of, yeah. Machiavelli noted how easily people are swayed by their immediate needs, making them kind of vulnerable. Strategic silence taps into this without necessarily being deceptive.
Like an interrogator using silence.
Mhm.
Letting the suspect get uncomfortable and just start talking to fill the void.
Classic technique. Or in that negotiation again, the side that can just sit comfortably with the silence often gets the better deal because the other side gets anxious and starts offering concessions.
Wow. Okay, so the silence itself applies pressure.
Definitely. The second psychological point, silence establishes dominance.
Dominance. How?
Think about a typical conversation. Often the person doing most of the talking can seem like they're trying to convince, maybe seeking approval.
Okay.
The person who speaks less, more deliberately, more calmly, they often come across as the one holding judgment, the one with the power.
Like, they're the judge, not the supplicant.
That's a good way to put it. It ties back again to being respected, maybe even slightly feared, rather than just liked. Reserve commands respect.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The job candidate who asks insightful questions and listens carefully rather than just talking nonstop about themselves.
They often seem more impressive, yeah. More thoughtful.
Or the quiet person in that meeting, when they finally do speak, people often listen more closely.
True. Even in an argument, sometimes just taking a breath, a moment of silence before responding, feels more powerful than an immediate comeback.
It shows control. And finally, silence creates mystique.
Mystique. Okay.
What we don't fully understand often seems bigger, more formidable than what's laid bare.
Like the unknown is more intimidating.
Often, yes. Machiavelli pointed out that people judge by appearances, by what they can see, because truly understanding something is harder, rarer.
So if you reveal everything about yourself,
you become known, predictable, ordinary. But if you hold things back, reveal selectively,
you retain an element of mystery, which makes you seem more powerful. Interesting.
It can certainly amplify perceived power. Think about leaders again, the one who explains every single detail of their decision-making process.
Might almost seem like anyone could do it. It demystifies it.
Perhaps. Compare that to the leader who clearly stakes the decision and the rationale, but keeps the internal debates and uncertainties private.
They maintain more of that leadership aura.
It often works out that way. Again, it's not about lying, but understanding how perception works and how selective sharing shapes influence.
This all feels quite challenging to the modern idea that transparency is like the ultimate virtue.
It definitely presents a counter perspective. Remember Machiavelli's line about promises. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present.
Oof, that sounds harsh.
It sounds ruthless, but the underlying point is about flexibility. Rigidly sticking to something you've said in the past, even when circumstances have totally changed, can undermine your current goals.
So, is our modern focus on total transparency sometimes counterproductive, like a self-imposed handicap?
From this viewpoint, it absolutely can be. It's not an argument for being dishonest. The clarification was important there. It's about selective disclosure.
Choosing what to share and when.
Right. Why reveal something that offers no immediate benefit but could potentially limit you or be used against you down the road?
That's the transparency trap idea there.
Exactly. You see it professionally when people prematurely share half-baked ideas or reveal their entire negotiation strategy up front.
Or personally, maybe oversharing about very tentative future plans or constantly rehashing old mistakes.
All examples of potentially giving away leverage or creating unnecessary vulnerabilities. The person who reveals everything can become
predictable, manipulable, less compelling.
Pretty much. Ordinary, even.
Okay, so this isn't about becoming a silent monk. It's about discipline, right?
Exactly. The discipline of silence. It's about developing the skill to choose silence when silence serves your objectives better than speaking.
How do you practice that?
Well, one key practice is information asymmetry. Consciously try to understand the other person's position, their needs, their constraints, before you lay out your own.
So ask more questions. Listen more intently.
Yes, and listen for what's not being said, too. Remember the fox and lion again. The fox has to be cunning to spot the traps that's information gathering while staying hidden.
That seems crucial in negotiations, obviously, but also just office politics, team dynamics.
Hugely valuable. Another practice. Cultivate strategic ambiguity.
Okay, we touched on this. Not being confusing, but
maintaining flexibility.
Right.
Not overcommitting with unnecessary specifics, especially early on. Machiavelli advised princes to be slow to act, slow to commit. That preserves freedom.
So in leadership, outline the what, but maybe not every detail of the how immediately.
Could be. Or in personal stuff, expressing commitment without locking into rigid, unchangeable plans way too soon.
Right. Keep some adaptability.
And the third thing, which might be the hardest for many people, develop comfort with silence itself.
Yeah, those awkward pauses.
Most people rush to fill them. It feels uncomfortable. The discipline is learning to just sit with it, tolerate it, even embrace it.
How does that help?
In negotiations, like we said, it prevents nervous concessions. In conflicts, it allows you to actually hear the other person instead of just reloading for your next point.
And in leadership?
It projects confidence. Delivering a decision without needing pages of justification can be very powerful. Let the decision stand on its own.
This leads to that idea of the strategic whisper, doesn't it?
Right. It's not about total silence, but about that contrast. Selective disclosure, because most people overshare.
The person who speaks selectively stands out.
Their words carry more weight. Their positions seem more considered. Their influence often expands, paradoxically, by saying less. Machiavelli noted the vulgar crowd is taken by appearances.
So selective sharing creates a more powerful appearance.
In a noisy world, yes. Restraint is rare and therefore valuable, but it takes patience, self-control, real strategic awareness.
And then there's the final irony you mentioned.
Yeah. The people who are best at this often fly completely under the radar.
We don't even notice them.
We tend to notice the loud ones, the expressive ones, the ones making waves. The masters of strategic silence might be achieving just as much or more, but quietly, without drawing attention to their methods.
They get the results without the fanfare.
Exactly. And maybe that gives us a different lens on Machiavelli himself. Not just ruthless, but someone with a really deep, maybe uncomfortable understanding of psychology and power.
And maybe the lesson isn't about manipulation, but about
knowing when the smartest, most influential thing you can do is simply be quiet, listen, observe, let others reveal themselves.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the core idea in this age of nonstop information and communication.
Strategic silence offers this counterintuitive but potentially really powerful path to influence.
It's about saying less, observing more, sharing selectively.
Consciously choosing your moments.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Think about a recent conversation, maybe an important one.
Where could a moment of strategic silence, maybe listening more, maybe holding back an immediate reaction, maybe preserving a little ambiguity, have changed the outcome?
Could it have been more advantageous? And looking forward, what might you choose not to say?
Yeah. Not to be deceptive, but to be more intentional, more strategic, for greater clarity and ultimately greater impact. Something to think about.